They're sentencing Ella Walker to death. The guard behind her tells the girl to move her legs. Ella is surrounded by ill-wishers, and the girl can hardly move her legs now because her body was tired after all the abuse. The girl was in her tattered clothes and wondered where she could have gone wrong. The judge says that Ella broke off her engagement to the prince unilaterally and caused serious damage to the royal family. However, the king granted her a pardon. In return, as a result of her repeated reckless acts as a manager, Ella caused the land entrusted to her to fall into disrepair and eventually provoked a rebellion. Ella's sister Isabella states the fact that her sister is a disgusting person, and it is unbelievable that they are related. But the estate was already in decline when Ella took over as steward. Everything was planned from start to finish, and Ella realizes that she was killed on purpose. But if she insists on deception now, no one will listen to Ella. The girl looks up and sees her sister Isabella. Meanwhile, a guard kicks the heroine in the back and tells her not to stand still. First, her stepmother decides on her and Ghilan's engagement. They became engaged during his rebellious period when the prince was still considered a troubled child. The union was meant to cement the Walker family's connection to the royal family. However, 10 years ago, Prince Ghilan's reputation began to recover, so she was followed by demands to break their engagement. The stepmother said she wanted to nominate her beautiful daughter to marry Prince Ghilan. Well, if her husband finds out about this, it could spell trouble. So she asks Ella to cancel their engagement to His Highness Ghilan. Ella did not agree to such demands from her stepmother. As Walker's eldest daughter, she cannot show such blatant irresponsibility. But Isabella didn't just stop there, so they ask Ella. If a girl is the eldest daughter, she can afford such a relationship from Isabella. The girl was radiant in her charm. Isabella thinks it's time Ella realized who her true master is. In retrospect, the heroine now believes it was that moment 10 years ago that doomed her. After Ella was forced from her quarters, under the pretext of renovation, they put her in a filthy, dusty attic where Ella was subjected to horrible conditions, and the portions of her meals were inferior even to the servants, and Ella ate very poorly. The girl was amazed why there was so little food on her plate. Ella realized that she had no fresh clothes and no contact with the outside world. Letters from her fiancé Ghilan stopped coming, and the girl found herself all alone. Ella believes that Ghilan probably feared the same fate, and the girl fell lower and lower. No one came to her rescue. If she continued to live like that, she would eventually go crazy or get sick or just die. The girl was in a dire situation. Her father hadn't shown up at the manor for quite some time either, and in case his daughter died, he would surely be saddened. Better to break off his engagement to Ghilan than to die for nothing. Isabella defeated Ella, and as soon as Ella did so, she lost any value, and Ella was sent to a decadent estate to die there. But being spiritually exhausted, she was unable to manage all the ruined estates. Now, however, whatever the heroine says, her words will not reach the people, for all they want is her death. The girl looked in the faces of the crowd like another executioner. It's not just Isabella and her stepmother, it's also that Ella's father doesn't really know anything. He's completely disconnected from the truth. Even Ghilan, to whom they were once betrothed, has been deceived. In the name of the king, Ghilan says he's announcing the execution of Ella Walker. If you could go back to that fateful day 10 years ago and start over, it would be great. If she could start over, she'd want to live the life she wanted to live in the first place, without any ties to this family or even Ghilan. Ella just wanted to enjoy her quiet life. But no matter how much the girl cries now, she is doomed to die because of her cunning stepmother and also her unloved sister. To be free like the birds. This is Ella's true dream. But when the girl did die, she opened her eyes and was surprised that she could still breathe. The girl doesn't understand. If it was all a dream, but it can't be. Her neck was cut off, and how could all this have happened? Ella realizes that her face was like this when she was young, and she suspects that maybe her wish to go back 10 years may have come true. But how is that possible? The girl looks in her diary and doesn't realize what date it is. The girl sees that she is now exactly 10 years back from the time of her death. Her stepmother and Isabella were going to talk to her before the news of her engagement to Ghilan became public. Today was the day Ella was supposed to talk to her. Wasn't it 10 years ago that all these events were happening? The maid wishes to discuss an extremely important matter with Ella. and the maid asks Ella to come to her. The girl realizes that this is very terrible news, because after this conversation, it was suggested to her to break the engagement from Gilan. Can this mean that Ella gave a second chance? The girl felt a variety of emotions and could not understand whether she should be happy or sad that fate might repeat itself. But Ella decides that she must try and not be afraid. When the girl met her stepmother and Isabella, the girl said that she was glad to see them. Isabella tells her sister that they have a very important conversation to have with her today. Ella says that's great, and she was just about to tell everyone something important. Ella tries to speak. All these words as if they meant nothing. Stepmother and Isabella were very surprised to see Ella happily telling them about her decision. The position of the eldest daughter of the Walker family is no longer of any importance. She will live the life she wants to live, and she's willing to give up the role of bride to Isabella. Ella admits that she doesn't want to be Gilan's bride, and after that, stepmother and Isabella were very surprised because they didn't expect such a thing from Ella, and they on the contrary thought that the girl would obstruct. The stepmother is very interested in why suddenly Ella decided to change her decision, and Ella says that it is her intuition, and she feels that Isabella will be better to have the role of Gilan's bride. Ella's intuition also tells her that Isabella wants to get closer to the prince, and that her mother is trying to support this union. And now that she's already guessed it, she's come to realize that as the older sister, she should give way to the younger one. Ella makes it sound like she's giving a gift to her stepmother and her sister. The stepmother says that Isabella was very happy that Ella gave up her seat, and also Ella is very perceptive. However, such a selfish move as breaking off the engagement for no reason is hardly going to be received with understanding by the royal family. But isn't that exactly what they were going to accomplish? The heroine doesn't understand why the stepmother says so, because if Ella didn't agree, the stepmother would starve Ella to death. Well, then it can be said that the time of responsibility from this engagement has affected her spiritually. But would such a reason be enough to break off the engagement? Ella realizes that if such a thing could help her, she would say anything to give up the engagement. Of course, she recognizes that this may not be enough, and there is a high probability of some sort of punishment for breaking the engagement on their part. But Ella has one suggestion for that. How about sending Ella to a remote estate called Eastwood? Isabella asks excitedly. Is her sister not going to come home? And Ella says that Isabella says all the right things and Ella decides to leave home. The stepmother doesn't understand why Ella would do such a thing, since she had planned to do it as a punishment for Ella. The stepmother thinks that sending her to a backwoods neighborhood sounds like an appropriate punishment. Ella is sent with her coachman to a distant land to become the ruler there. Isabella was very glad to see Ella go. But Ella sat in the carriage and was very happy about the joke she had played on her stepmother. Her stepmother had a very strange look on her face. The girl is trying to contain her laughter. Looks like her taking the initiative didn't make her stepmother too happy. Coachman goes on to say that they are almost to the heart of Eastwood. The girl decides to look outside to see what is going on. Ella was shocked by what she saw, because in the center of Eastwood City there is a real ruin, and also people were poor, hungry, and also in the cold. A huge number of people were lying on the ground, and it was not clear whether they were alive or just sleeping. Even so, the situation here. It's not that complicated yet, as it was when the uprising broke out in her previous life. Ella realizes there's still a chance to reclaim this land. At some point, a man appears in front of the carriage, and the coachman yells at him not to jump out so suddenly, because he must have had enough of life, because the horses might crush the boy. The boy asks because there is a very rich uncle in the carriage, and it is possible to ask the boy to this man about food, because the boy would like to get at least some food, because soon he will die of hunger. Ella realizes that the situation is very scary. She feels sorry for the poor little boy. She pulls out the bread and says that this is all she has, so she asks the boy for some food. But coachman says that Mrs. Ella, you shouldn't do that. But the boy goes up to the girl and thanks her. Next moment, two strange men appear behind the boy, who were more behind the boy that asked for bread. The coachman says that sharing the bread is quite kind of Ella, but was a big mistake. Meanwhile, the boy asks, is Ella from the nobility? He's curious to get to know Ella better. The girl realizes that the situation in the area is very complicated, and it will be very difficult to renew these lands. The coachman says that the lady should stay in the carriage, because now he will speed up. But the lads come in and order Ella to leave them all the food and get out. The men say the aristocrats are robbing them day after day. They wave their fists after the carriage speeds away. Ella realizes that the Eastwood men have a lot of hatred for the aristocrats for not helping the ruined land. Last time she was there, she was so depressed she didn't even notice what was going on around her. Ella was terrified of her lot and couldn't do anything to help the poor people. But now she must take on the role of manager properly and restore the land. For Ella believes it is her key to survival, and she will outwit her stepmother to survive. Then Ella heads to her new home, and it's a mansion near Eastwood. Starting today, she takes over as Eastwood's caretaker. The girl introduces herself to her servants and calls herself Ella Walker, and she is happy to meet her new subordinates, and first of all, she would like to organize tonight a food distribution for the townspeople. But the servants were surprised. Is Ella really talking about a food distribution tonight? Is it really going to take place right through the city streets? It's not safe. They're not prepared for that, and Ella definitely shouldn't be out on Eastwood Street. Ella could be attacked at any moment, and her butler says it could be dangerous to leave the palace walls. Besides, given her current condition, the previous ruler will continue in office. It's best for Ella to be careful. But Ella says that if she's not there, there's no point, because Ella has to help the poor people who suffer day in and day out. As their steward, Ella must learn from her people about their hardships and worries. Then Ella and her servants went to the main square of Eastwood and prepared food for the needy. The girl distributed hot soup to poor people in need of some food. She heard that people needed help, and as soon as she became the new governor, she decided to help them. A man comes up and thanks Ella that the girl decided to help them. The man says it is a great pity that Ella was sent here at such a young age. Although years ago, this town was not so bad. Ella doesn't understand what her guest is trying to say. After all, the previous lord was a madman. The man reveals to Ella that over the past few decades, their lord has done nothing but scrape together taxes. As a result of which, all their energies are spent on maintaining their own subsistence, and people are not even able to raise their children properly. The former lord is still in office. No matter how bad their situation is, the royal capital doesn't know anything about it. So the young people mostly flee from these places and get as far away from here as possible. Ella realizes the plight of the town. Will Ella be able to make a difference to Eastwood under these circumstances? Ella wasn't the only one who had a hard time, and she realizes that all these people were suffering. The girl was living her life last time, and she was fixated on her own suffering. Of course, she had her share of hardships, but all Ella did then was put up with it. As if she were the most miserable person in the world, she didn't even try to change the situation. Ella is determined to fix the current situation in Eastwood and help the poor people who suffer day in and day out. And she gives the man her word and what needs to be done to accomplish that goal first. She will see the current Lord Acting Steward tomorrow. Ella must see whether he is truly fit for the role. A man appears behind the lady and apologizes. He says to hurry up and collect all the plates. Ella realizes that as acting ruler, she wants an exceptionally trustworthy man as lord. But what is happening in the main square is being watched by a cunning lord who does not intend to lose to Ella. The events are transferred to Isabella. The girl receives a huge number of gifts from different men, and she realizes that being queen is simply delightful, and Isabella hopes that she will live her whole life in luxury. How glad she is that her sister is no longer here. But the man who stands next to Isabella realizes that she is, after all, already engaged to the next king, but still accepts gifts from other noble men. Isabella is a very windy lady, and the minister doesn't like Isabella's behavior. After all, she has nothing in common with the lady who is very well-mannered. What was Prince Gailun thinking when he changed his mind in favor of Isabella? Isabella turns to Mr. Minister and the man listens attentively. Isabella looks at the minister with a smile and tells him that she is much more suitable for the role of queen than her older sister and wants the minister to confirm it. The girl enjoys her power as well as her strength. Meanwhile, Ella visits the estate of the lord who destroyed Eastwood with his heavy taxes. Ella confesses that she is the new ruler of Eastwood and wanted to see how the lord of Eastwood's lands would fulfill her position. She calls herself Ella Walker. The girl doesn't look very favorably at the lord. The man smiles very slyly and says that Ella is his new lovely lady steward, and he is the acting steward of Devon. Today, Ella will at least talk to Devon about Eastwood's fate as well as his stewardship. Ella realizes that this mansion is like another world compared to the rest of the city. There's no telling how far Devon's profligacy has gone. Lord Devon approaches Ella and asks, "Is this really going to be their first date?" But Ella tries to fend off the fat Devon and tries to convince him that this will be strictly business talk, because apparently this lustful man thinks that Ella might be looking at him. Then Lord Devon smiles and says that there is no hurry and offers to make friends with Ella. Ella then states the fact that Lord Devon is very fond of art because his mansion has a lot of different valuables. Lord Devon says that this is true and that he has an eye for beautiful things. But no work of art can compare to the beauty of Lady Ella. The girl doesn't buy such a trivial compliment and says that it must have taken a lot of money to put together such a vast collection. And Lord Devon says that Ella is right and it all costs a lot of money. Then the girl asks Devon how he managed to acquire such a fortune in such an economically deplorable region. The girl needs an explanation because she is his boss. But Lord Devon tells her that the ruler gets as much oil and taxes as he squeezes out. His job is to use this resource to the utmost advantage. Apparently this pig is so mad they can't see any wrongdoing in their corrupt schemes. Ella claims asks, "Doesn't Devon feel sorry for ruining his own people? As a steward, shouldn't Lord Devon think of the people first?" But Lord Devon clutches the maid standing next to him and says that the only thing Ella says is right is that the people should serve him. They have been forced to take on the burden of ruling such a distant land, and to do so without getting their due would be simply unfair. Besides, in this world, survival of the fittest, and Lord Devon believes this to be true. Ella also realizes that there is truth in Devon's words, because in this world it is truly survival of the fittest. Lord Devon says that Ella's angry face is just as beautiful as her smile. Lord Devon continues to try to hit on his boss. Lord Devon says that sooner or later Ella will realize his train of thought. The girl realizes that a man like Lord Devon will only continue to line his pockets. He's not going to change. If he continues to stay in power, it is bound to end in the same rebellion she saw last time. In that case, the responsibility will fall back on Ella, and the girl will be killed. She realizes that there's no way she'll descend to that level, and the heroine must end Devon's corruption to save her neck. But she certainly doesn't want to be killed by the cunning lord. After all, he now has a huge amount of resources, and the girl must stop the lord's revenge attempts at the root. Eastwood is also known as the Cemetery of Statesmen. It's where he sends those who have been demoted. And Ella was one of those promoted to the edge of the empire. But when it comes to idleness and incompetence, it's more often than not a complete dismissal. In other words, Eastwood is a collection of people kept away from the royal capital, for no particular reason. Among them must surely be talented individuals who just fell under the hot hand of their superiors. Some of them could have gotten here for no reason at all, if Ella had managed to bring all the talent together. She could turn Eastwood into a real realm of order and prosperity. Ella decides to gather the honored gentlemen and ask for their attention. The lady wants to implement a series of reforms in Eastwood to turn the place into a blooming garden. They must achieve a stable standard of living for many people and make the land self-sufficient and independent. And to do that, she needs the support of the people she has gathered in this room. But someone raises their voice in the hall and says that Madam Administrator needs to stop. I can't believe the daughter of such a prominent house was appointed to run this backwater estate. Ella was just forced to leave the royal capital because of some problems like the rest of the aristocrats. That's the first thing that comes to mind for anyone who's been demoted in one way or another. If Ella manages to make some progress, she will surely be able to see the capital again. But here, any progress Ella makes is thwarted by Devon. The man won't let Ella reform in any way. It may sound harsh, but the lady would rather sit tight and keep her head down. Ella realizes that if she follows the man's advice, it will get her killed. So no matter what people say, she will give up her purpose and do whatever it takes to make this land prosperous. Ella asks the aristocrats what their thoughts are on the current situation in Eastwood. The man says there is very little to like about Eastwood. Ella agrees, and she realizes that from the aristocrats' words, they would like a chance to be in the royal capital again. The girl asks if the men and women would like to be in the attention of the empire again, and the men say that if such a thing were possible, they would gladly do it. whatever it takes to get back into the capital. None of the Eastwood men have ever been able to get back there. Ella says that in that case, they just need to make this city as prosperous a center as their non-capital city. Ella promises that she will make every effort to turn this place into a paradise with the help of the lords gathered here. The distance from the capital also means that they are less susceptible to its influence. And looking at the aristocrats in a prosperous, independent city, many people in the capital will be jealous. But people laugh and say that this is utter folly and don't understand what Madame is saying. They don't believe what she's saying. Ella knocks on the table and scares the gathered aristocrats with her behavior and stops their laughter. If they do not reform the lands, Ella will be killed. The girl says these words out of the coldness in her eyes and looks at the assembled aristocrats as if they were death row. She may be reckless, but she is deadly serious, and since her life is at stake, she will take all necessary measures. But Ella doesn't think it's reckless in the first place because they already know where the main money is concentrated, and the problem is Lord Geelong. And all of them can cope from Devon if they unite. However, they have a lot of work to do. But if the boys can succeed, they can become great. But what happens if they continue to rot in this land? Ella suggests that the people try to burn with her rather than continue to rot in these lands. Ella suggests less evil for the aristocrats gathered here. Events move on to Lady Isabella. The girl asks the minister if she is fit to be a princess to the queen. The minister says that his lady is undoubtedly the best for their kingdom, so she should not doubt her exclusivity. But Isabella wanted to ask the minister what the papers Isabella could find meant. She doesn't understand what this meeting is about to disagree with the engagement between Isabella Walker and Prince Geelong. And on this sheet, the minister's name seems to be among the attendees. It was very difficult for the man to explain to Isabella what it meant. And Isabella in turn says she doesn't like people who get in her way. What will happen to those who dare to go against the queen? Isabella decides that she will teach the minister a lesson and make it all clear. Events are brought back to Ella, and through the interaction and cooperation of government officials, the current situation in Eastwood becomes clearer. Over the past few years, Lord Devon has exploited his people by tripling taxation, and Devon has not been stopped until now, only because he bribed the capital's aristocrats. It's a real disgrace to their great country. And yet, where did Lord Devon find the means to bribe the officials? Because in Eastwood, there are no industries, no useful resources. But the next moment, Ella discovers the truth. The papers Ella found have the name Walker on them. One of the aristocrats asks Ella, who's been scrutinizing the papers, what's going on with her, because she looks very worried. Her assistant also asks if there's anything Ella can do to help. But Ella thanks the nobleman for his excitement and for his help. The girl will be very happy for them to cooperate further. The employee smiles and says that Mrs. Ella is very nice and also very kind to people around her. Ella realizes that if they sort things out from Devon, Isabella and the stepmother might turn against Eastwood. Then it will be very difficult for Ella to stand up to her great family. But to fulfill the expectations of the civil servants and save the subjects from distress withal, cannot leave this situation without attention. Now they have all the evidence in their hands, and Ella decides that it is necessary to go into battle. The pair head to Devon Mansion. When Ella heads to Devon's place, she is met with a very sloppy welcome. The man came out in his robe. Even though Ella's position, he doesn't like to be disturbed. However, even being a little selfish, Ella is quite very nice. The man continues not to give up his attempts to hit on Ella. But Ella coldly replies that she has a very important conversation to have with Devon, and that conversation cannot wait. Ella asks if Lord Devon is willing to dry her out. Ella shows a list of Devon's bought nobles who covered up the illegal overcharging of the taxes he collected. Ella now has all the proof that Lord Devon is corrupt. Ella then asks Lord Devon to explain himself. Lord Devon realizes that this girl has lost her mind. How she managed to find dirt on him on such short notice. Lord Devon says that if you think about it, it could all be a setup. It's just one of the duties of a steward. Lord Devon asks Ella how much he should pay Ella to make the girl forget about this whole conversation. Ella realizes that Lord Devon isn't even trying to justify himself, and he's wallowing in his madness. Lord Devon asks, doesn't Ella appreciate a ringing coin? Then he asks what Ella thinks of the art, for he could give Ella his collection. But Ella coldly tells Devon that the man is no match for Lord Eastwood's stewardship. As of this moment, Lord Devon is relieved of his official duties, and all his property is to be confiscated. The next moment, the guards in whom Ella had asked in advance to accompany her rush into the hall. They knock all his importance out of Devon and also arrest him. The Lord asks what Ella can do, but Ella says that according to the law, the current governor has the right to dismiss a corrupt official and confiscate his corrupt assets. And she can order Devon's execution at will if she thinks his offense was too great to be in a simple dungeon. But Lord Devon cries out that the Walker family is also tied to him. The Lord threatens Ella that the Walkers might pull a backlash if they find out their official has been arrested. Ella realizes that it turns out the stepmother was supporting Devon, and it's true. Ella tells Devon that it's unfortunate she's the eldest daughter of the Walker family. She just wants to finally say goodbye to the memories of the past. However, even though this is Ella's second life, she's still connected to the same family. After the Devon trial, the civil servant would like to give Lady Ella a progress report regarding reforms to taxation and reforming their own military units. So far, things have not gone as smoothly as hoped. However, the forecast is that they will be back on track in 3 years. Ella is amazed. After 3 years, they will be able to achieve good results. After all, her employees are talented people. But her assistant says that everything was possible only thanks to the actions of Lady Ella, who united the nobles and was able to get rid of the corrupt Devon. If it wasn't for Ella, the aristocrats would have continued to rot in Eastwood, but she inspired them. After Ella's famous speech, it was as if the people were born again and their hopes of making Eastwood their home were ignited. Ella Mila smiles as she realizes that even though she has only recently traveled back in time, she has already been able to make so many people happy. So she realizes that this should have been her cue, because it was the civil servants who made a huge amount of effort, reforming and transforming Eastwood so that it's as good as the royal capital. They need to do it all together and they will get the results they need. The people support Ella, and she is told that together they can realize their goals. With the removal of Devon, public order is slowly returning to normal. This move will prevent the rebellion that led to Ella's execution last time. However, anxiety is still very much alive as Isabella remains a great danger with her stepmother to Ella. Her time in the Empire, Gilon was confronted with an important question. A woman asked what Gilon thought of his new bride. It turned out to be Gilon's grandmother. The man asks, "Is it his grandmother's that Isabella is referring to?" Gilon wonders if perhaps the grandmother wants to know his thoughts. The grandmother tells him that recently there was an execution of one of the ministers, and as Granny knew, Isabella had organized the brutal execution. But whether it was really worth executing a man in such a brutal way. Granny doesn't know the reasons why the minister was accused. The woman wonders whether Gilon really agrees to have Isabella as his bride. Gilon says that his father has long wished to strengthen the bond with the very important Walker family, and as a prince, he can only fulfill his duty. The executed minister was the head of a faction opposed to the family's growing influence, and Isabella executed the ministers as an example. The terrified aristocrats are desperate to gain favor with the Walker family, to save their lives. The grandmother is more interested in asking her grandson's opinion. After all, he wasn't so submissive before, and what happened to Gilon? Does Gilon not have any thoughts about a new bride? But Gilon says that as crown prince, he has to think first of all about the government of the state and the royal family, and his personal feelings will only be a hindrance to achieve the goals of the state. Grandmother cannot say that the present Gil is well suited for the role of the future king because he is tightly bound only by his obligations and otherwise devoid of his own will. The grandmother looks at her grandson very strangely and does not understand what is happening. She wonders if there is a man somewhere who can open the heart of this child. It's been 3 years since Devon was displaced. The Eastwood Center had become a very prosperous place where people were enjoying their lives. Ella decided to visit with her assistant, and she was surprised at how things had changed. The boy who met the lady manager was very happy to see Ella. Ella was also happy to see the boy's happy and satisfied face. After all, going out on the town really does help to unwind. She couldn't have dreamed what it would be like, walking the streets of the city by herself like this. Despite the vast improvement from 3 years ago, the safety of the city streets is still an issue. Ella suggests that they don't talk about the general headache right now. Ella also asks her friend not to worry, because after all, she's not so fidgety after all. Even if you don't take into account Ella's position, she has a very noticeable face and stands out in the crowd. The girl pulls her hood more tightly over her head. When such a lady walks alone, and there certainly attracts attention. If Ella were even in the middle of the royal capital, the effect would be the same. Ella is very famous in these parts. Ella realizes that she no longer has any ties to the royal capital and no longer wants to be there. After all, she has turned her prison into a Garden of Eden since she has already decided to devote herself to Eastwood. When Ella returns to the mansion, she is greeted by a maid. Ella thanks her and asks if there has been any incident during her absence. Next, the maids tell Ella that a letter has arrived for her. Ella accepts the sheet and realizes that it is from the royal capital. Ella realizes that if it is a letter from the capital, then perhaps it has something to do with her stepmother and Isabella. The girl asks who could have sent the letter. The maid says that most likely it was someone from the royal family. Someone from the royal family wrote to Ella, and she doesn't understand why it happened. Ella is not related to them in any way. It was also said that they want to see Ella as soon as possible. The lady was obviously not happy to hear such a message. Ella thanks the maid and asks to see the envelope immediately. It's a notice of a celebration in honor of the kingdom's 150th anniversary. The event is organized by the former Queen Elizabeth, and all the key nobles have been invited. Since it's a reception in the royal capital, that means Isabella will definitely be attending the event. And if Isabella knew Ella was invited, she'd probably try to interfere. Aside from justifying sending her to the backwoods Walker family, no doubt Isabella had resorted to some additional measures, such as spreading some nasty rumors. So now she may have more than just Isabella on her enemies list, and Ella may hate a lot of aristocrats. There's really no point in her attending the event at all. But when it comes to an invitation from Her Majesty Elizabeth, Ella can't just ignore it. Besides, she sent an envelope to such a remote region. Yes, and it looks like the event promises to be quite high profile. Despite Ella's expulsion, she's still a member of the Walker family. If she refuses to participate, Ella could be accused of dishonoring her clan, which could result in her even in the middle of nowhere. So if Ella wants to protect the Eastwoods, she has no choice but to agree to the event. Ella's worried because the sword of Damocles is hanging over her neck again. But it's okay. After all, it's just for one day, and she has to get through it somehow. Ella will keep a low profile and won't raise any excitement. Meanwhile, Isabella discusses with her stepmother that 3 years have passed since their engagement to the prince. It's been that long since all the disturbances have been removed. The daughter is surprised that too much time has passed, and it is strange how the girl did not notice it. Isabella is also excited that at the upcoming gala, she will finally be officially announced as Prince Guilon's bride. But Isabella sees that her mother is very sad and can't understand why she doesn't feel joy. Stepmother admits that it looks like Ella will also be invited to the event, and she will attend this ball together with Isabella. The girl was not very happy about this news, and she does not want to see her sister at such events, and she does not understand why this could happen. Probably because of the high importance of the celebration. After all, Ella is still a representative of a significant family despite her current stay in the wilderness. But Isabella wonders if enough time has passed to make Ella's participation appropriate. She thinks that rural life has already turned Ella into a quiet man. Stepmother says it will be obvious to everyone when Ella arrives in the royal capital and they can take it easy. So Isabella needn't worry about having her role as the evening's main character stolen from her. But Mom wanted to ask about something else because Isabella has to remember a man like Lord Devon. But Isabella says she can't remember Devon. She asks her mom to tell her. Isabella hears from her mother that Lord Devon was Eastwood's former steward and is the one who sent her the ring the girl is wearing as a gift. Isabella realizes that she has not been paying attention to all those people who have tried to serve her. He was an untalented but very useful man to her stepmother and Isabella. And yet Ella had him executed. In reality, Ella is just a young maiden who's used to excessive zeal. But the stepmother is worried she might throw something out during the reception. Isabella believes her mother's fears may be justified and they need to be counteracted by Ella. Isabella smiles nastily and asks her mom, "Is this really the opportunity to point her sister in her place?" Isabella says that as long as the gala lasts, Ella will not be able to attend Eastwood, and that is true. If something happens at Eastwood during her absence, Isabella believes it could get her in big trouble. Isabella nastily plans a plan to hurt Ella. When the day of the reception came, all the men in the room were struck by Mrs. Isabella's radiance. Today's outfit suited Isabella very well. The girl received compliments from the men, and on her hand were seen huge rings, and also in her ears were earrings with large, precious stones. Isabella simply adored everything bright. The aristocrats said that Isabella was undoubtedly the most beautiful girl of this country, and she was very noble. The girls were pleased and realized that this route was definitely the best. And the men, as always, are boasting and running after Isabella. Now men are just eager to win Isabella's favor. Next, a loyal servant approaches Isabella and asks about that matter. After all, it will most likely be made public at this ball. Isabella smiles nastily and says that the servant is correct and they will do just that. That's exactly what he says. The servant says that today is finally the day. Isabella has been longing for this for 3 years. An evening celebrating 150 years of the kingdom is a more fitting scene to introduce the new queen. Isabella is the protagonist of the evening, and no one can take away her brilliance. But the next moment, one of the men in the audience asks where this mysterious lady has come from, for he does not recall having seen her before. Having seen such a charming lady at least once, it is impossible to forget her. The aristocrats wondered, is it possible that Ella is from far away, and this is a distant region from the capital? Ella could not find a place among men. She was very uncomfortable. The girl confesses that she is from Eastwood and her home is there. The men were a little taken aback by her answer. Is Eastwood really home to such a beautiful lady? For they say that this backwoods town has been normalized in only 3 years. Could it be the mysterious Lady Ella acting as Eastwood's steward? Ella confirms the men's speculation and says it's true. Around Ella gathers a huge number of aristocrats and say that it is amazing, and could not have thought that the very determined Lady Novator, about which there are so many rumors in fact, turns out to be such a graceful and lovely person. Besides, Ella is the eldest daughter of the famous Walker House and Lady Isabella's older sister. Ella confirms the men's words and says that it is so. The heroine does not understand why people look at her so intently and why she received so much attention. Ella just wanted to be a modest mouse amidst all the ball, and she doesn't understand why she has gathered so much attention. Meanwhile, Isabella sees some pandemonium and can't understand what could have caused such a strong reaction of people. She wonders who is the cause of so much excitement among the guests of the event. Isabella realizes that she doesn't like it when the attention of the main character is taken away by someone. Isabella is the heroine of tonight's event, and she won't let anyone take away her honor. Ella apologizes to the honored guests and says she's not feeling well, and she needs to step away for a while. She suggests that they can discuss Eastwood's reforms another time. But at some point, Isabella arrives and disperses the crowd while asking what all the fuss is about. Isabella glares angrily at her sister, and Ella realizes that this is a bad thing, because she is at Isabella's mercy, and it could end badly. The next moment, Isabella walks up to Ella and greets her. Isabella says that they haven't seen each other for a long time, and Ella is not invited to the event either. After all, this route is considered very noble, and one wonders how Ella from some backwater could be here. Ella smiles nervously and says that she is happy to see Isabella too. Tonight is a very important evening, and she couldn't stay cooped up away from the capital on such a special day. Isabella smiles happily and says that she has heard that Ella is on the mend, and it is a relief to see that her big sister is doing much better. Isabella is selective in her words. Isabella comments that Ella has a very festive outfit, and it seems to have paid off. Isabella realizes that Ella has been lavished with much and tumultuous attention, but if Ella stands out too much, the other partygoers may feel hurt. Isabella says that this evening is not Ella's night, and she must remain a quiet mouse so that no one pays attention to her. Ella apologizes, and she didn't think these noble gentlemen would be so disturbed by the dress. She also wanted to thank Isabella and her mother for giving her the opportunity to improve her health. Ella was much better now, so much so that she could be present here today. But it's been so long since she's been to a ball that she's gotten used to it. That's why Ella is already tired. The girl realizes that she has to play along with her made-up story about her ill health, because of which Ella refused her engagement to the prince. Ella says she won't be here long, and Isabella shouldn't worry that Ella will take a lot of the attention away from her. When the bell rings on the big clock that stood in the hall, Isabella states the fact that the moment has come and her sister will be strong enough to witness the main event. And then Ella will go straight to rest, because Isabella wants her to. Ella is surprised at Isabella's behavior. Her little sister says it was nice to see Ella. After so many years of separation, she wishes Ella would never come here again. Ella had expected Isabella to be more sharp-tongued. Usually Isabella would have tried to see her off as soon as possible, and Ella doesn't understand why Isabella would say such things, and perhaps her little sister has come up with some devious plan. The next moment, the king asks for the guests' attention, for he benevolences all of them for having guests in this hall today. This is a very important day for their kingdom, and thanks to all of them, they can properly celebrate the 150th anniversary of their country. This fact makes the king very happy that he wishes his kingdom to prosper. However, this is not the only happy occasion of the day, and it's finally time to make it public. It has been decided that his son, Prince Gilon, and the Lady Walker will marry. Isabella rejoices with her friends at this news, and she was incredibly happy at the king's words. The king also wants to say that he intends to crown his son, as long as he is still alive and in good health, because he considers it his duty. So he asks to rejoice and praise the future king and queen. But at some point, the former queen and mother of the current king steps in. She asks everyone to pay attention to her because the queen is against the current marriage. She cannot approve of the king's decision. The woman says that as a former queen, she cannot approve of Gilon's marriage to Lady Isabella. Ella realizes that it is Her Majesty Elizabeth, and she is Gilon's grandmother. The king asks why mom is here and if she is. They haven't settled the matter before. But the grandmother says she never said she agreed, so the topic is still open for discussion. And since the king has decided to announce the engagement despite the open dispute, she also does not intend to be ceremonious. The intention to strengthen the bond of the Walker family is completely justified, as it will benefit the kingdom and strengthen its position. But what will happen if in the hands of Isabella, who is still linked to the prince only by an engagement, will be the power of the queen? What horrors Isabella will unleash when she gains power? The king's faction, blinded by money and the pleasure of self-interest, has repeatedly ignored the collective petition against this engagement. Of course, it's a shame that it ended up shaking the royal family's dirty laundry in front of everyone on such a memorable day. But for the good of this country and her dear grandson Gilon, Elizabeth cannot allow this engagement to take place. Isabella approaches Elizabeth and asks, "What does Elizabeth mean by disapproving of this marriage as a former queen? Does she think Isabella is not fit for the role?" Isabella looks at Elizabeth with such a horrible look that anyone would think Isabella wants to gnaw the former queen with her own teeth. Elizabeth says that for the last 3 years, Isabella has behaved abominably. And besides, there is a girl in this room today who is more suitable for the role of bride than Isabella. Isabella doesn't understand what kind of girl could be more suitable to be queen. After all, Isabella sees no one else here. But Elizabeth says that the best option for their kingdom is for Ella Walker to be queen. That is the person who should rule this country with Gilon. Elizabeth sees Ella as the hope for their kingdom and says that this girl can be trusted to rule over the people. Ella doesn't understand why these events are happening because the girl just wanted to live her life peacefully in the existence in her town of Eastwood. But why she is always getting into trouble? Meanwhile, Isabella is laughing, and you can see that the girl was puzzled by Elizabeth's words. Isabella challenges the former queen to ask if Her Majesty doesn't know that her sister broke off her engagement to Prince Gilon of her own free will and is now living in a remote estate to improve her health. Isabella asks Ella if it's true, but Ella has a hard time saying anything because everyone in the room is paying attention to her. Isabella says it's hard to think that a person who wasn't even supposed to be in the room in the first place would suddenly become a candidate for queen, and it's unthinkable. Elizabeth asks Ella Walker to approach her. Ella does not understand why it is she who has already hoped to be free in this life. The heroine believes that Her Majesty Elizabeth has some misunderstanding about everything that is going on. But still, Ella decides to approach Elizabeth because it was a request of the former queen. She does not want to be at odds with Isabella over the engagement. It is necessary to avoid it at all costs, because on the eve of Ella's life, Elizabeth further reveals that her older sister Isabella has a number of outstanding achievements as Eastwood steward. Elizabeth has prepared a list of all the outstanding things Ella has done in just 3 years as steward. Elizabeth asks a servant to read the list aloud. The servant tells her that Lady Ella has spoken out against the unscrupulous Lord Devon, who fulfilled the duties of steward before her, and has ruled on his case, according to his deeds, and also worked personally to restore the beautification of the estate entrusted to her. Ella stimulated a social movement to reduce unemployment and economic growth, and organized the creation of regular troops to strengthen security and public order. The people around her were shocked at Ella's ability to be the best ruler they had ever heard of, because Eastwood was in a terrible situation, and it was inconceivable that Lady Ella could pull off such a miracle in such a short period of time. She had accomplished so much in a rather remote region from the capital, and this lady was a remarkable talent. Her direct involvement in state politics certainly bodes well for the future. All these achievements are not only Ella's personal merit, and it seems that Her Majesty still overestimated her. After all, Ella has been helped by her friends with whom she has become good friends over the past 3 years. Based on all this information, Elizabeth thought Ella Walker was a more suitable candidate for the role of future queen. Comparison with Isabella Elizabeth does not know a single positive fact that Isabella could share. She covered herself with her position as the prince's bride and simply played cruel games and nothing more. Isabella is not discouraged, and says with a sly smile that she doesn't quite understand the essence of the statement Her Majesty has just made. After all, Isabella was born to stand above the people, so isn't it only right for her to be their ruler? And isn't what her sister does in the middle of nowhere important to the kingdom? Isabella turns to Gilon, and he says that he too was destined for the role of ruler of the kingdom from birth, and should share Isabella's thoughts. But Gilon says he doesn't care either way, and until he marries someone of Gilon's choosing, he is still a prince, not a king. Isabella looks at her fiancé with displeasure, and realizes she can't expect him to support her. Isabella asks the dear queen to discuss the matter later and exclusively among the interested parties, and Isabella does not think it is worth embarrassing the honored guests with all the discussions. The king agrees with Isabella's words and says they can do so. The queen asks her son. Probably he will no longer dismiss this important conversation. The king had to agree with the queen. Next, Elizabeth apologizes to Ella Walker for her intemperance, but she had no other choice, except to do it here and now, and Elizabeth will not tolerate Isabella becoming queen. Ella says she understands Her Majesty's decision and cannot disagree. She was already thinking that the second execution had passed her by, and if nothing is done, Isabella will undoubtedly take revenge on Ella again. Ella realizes that she still has a lot to do as ruler, so she has no desire to get involved in a battle for the royal title. Isabella then approaches Ella and says to at least talk to her a little bit about Elizabeth's claim. Isabella wants to make sure Ella hasn't gotten any worse, and her little sister will pray that Ella feels well. Then the events move to Eastwood, and the boys discuss that Lady Isabella is very mad because she has promised to pay them a huge amount of money if they attack that town. Anyway, it's their noblemen's power games, and it doesn't concern the ordinary working men who are just doing their part. The men realize that they should just do their job and not pay attention. Next, the guard on the tower sees that there is a strange smoke in Eastwood, and the alarm must be called. Robbers attacked Eastwood and killed the townspeople. They demanded that people give up all their money and food, and the bandits will take away everything they have. Next moment, one of the fleeing girls falls down and the dirty hands of the bandits reach for her. The girl cries and asks for help. The events once again move to the capital. Mama asks Isabella if it wouldn't be better to swat Ella right on the same spot in the ballroom. But Isabella laughs and says that it wasn't necessary, and her sister obviously won't have the opportunity to attend the negotiations. Stepmother asks, "Does this have something to do with that horrifying affair as well?" Isabella has prepared. The daughter says it might as well be, because a little charity event in Eastwood will go a long way to helping everyone. Isabella has donated some money for the drunken and destitute and through her solicitor. However, it seems her servant misunderstood something and said something unnecessary for these poor people. After all, apparently her servant said he wanted to destroy Eastwood. Isabella asks her mother, for there are still no decent guards in this wilderness, so even a few bandits can do a lot of damage, if they're good enough to go on a rampage. At this rate, Governor Ella won't have time to negotiate. Mama smiles slyly and says that Ella's suitability as stewardess will be in question when Eastwood is destroyed. as will the former queen's confidence in Ella's candidacy for Isabella's seat. The queen and her reputation will suffer. Isabella laughs happily and was very happy about what happened. But when the day of assembly began, Isabella and her stepmother were surprised to see her sister here. Ella doesn't understand why Isabella is surprised because she was summoned by the queen herself. Ella laughs at Isabella, and apparently they are surprised by Ella's presence. A few days earlier, Ella had thought that she would eventually have to stay in the capital until the appointed day of the meeting. She had hoped that if she kept quiet, the event would go off quietly. But as a result, Ella had caused Isabella's radiant pedestal to be smeared with mud. And now, Isabella is sure to hold a grudge against Ella. Someone like Ella is definitely not fit to be queen, and one wonders what guided Her Majesty Elizabeth in considering Ella. But there is a knock on Ella's bedroom door, and Ella asks to come in. A maid comes into her room and says they have received an urgent message from Eastwood. Ella gets the letter and asks what's wrong. After all, if the message is urgent, then it's a very important matter. And when Ella read about the attack on Eastwood, she was very surprised. The maid asks what happened, and Ella tells her that it looks like Eastwood was robbed. However, thanks to their troops, the damage was not so great. Still, there were a few casualties. Ella wants to get back to Eastwood as soon as possible and get to the bottom of it all. But according to the criminals who were caught, they were hired by someone to carry out the attack. And if the perps aren't lying, there's a good chance that Ella knows the identity of the person who hired them. It's her younger and more devious sister who wanted to take Ella back to Eastwood to keep her out of the way. Private troops were hired by them in order to gain more independence from the kingdom, but Ella didn't realize that troops could be useful in such a situation. Ella wants to give the troops her answer as quickly as possible, and could a servant girl bring her a writing utensil for her mistress to quickly write a reply? The maid leaves, and Ella realizes that she has in fact been saved by a talented official and frequent military corps. She can only return to Eastwood once she's certain that Isabella is behind the attack, and Ella can tolerate anything. But she will never forgive Isabella for the death of her subjects because of an attack by bribed brigands. Ella sees the expression on Isabella's face and realizes that no words are needed because Isabella's hand is probably behind the attack on Eastwood. Ella is determined to prevent such incidents from happening, for she does not intend to lose any more of her subjects. Isabella says, a little frightened, that she heard someone attacking Eastwood. And since Ella is here in the capital, doesn't she care about the damage to her land? Isabella tries to humiliate Ella with her words. Ella was very angry at Isabella's words, and her hands began to shake with restrained anger and rage. But Ella held back and flatteringly replies that Isabella has a very sensitive ear, and yet their private military corps has minimized the damage. But truth be told, Ella would like to return to Eastwood as soon as possible, but she dares not shirk from meeting the royal family for such a cause. For as the ruler has done, Ella realizes the full extent of her responsibility. Ella responded beautifully to Isabella's indignation and put her little sister in her place. At one point, the courtier says that the royal family will be arriving soon, and Isabella sits down with Ella. The conversation that Elizabeth has wanted for so long begins. The king says they can begin the meeting to celebrate his Guilan's engagement. Then the grandmother takes the floor and says that making Isabella queen and strengthening the ties of the Walker family will be of great benefit to the country. And if it is only about that, Ella is also a candidate for queen, and also comes from the Walker family, and this is a chance for Ella to take power, which has proven itself in the Eastwood's place of stewardship. The king tells his mother that the woman knows the situation perfectly well. Ella Walker was once engaged to Guilan. She broke off the engagement due to allegedly failing health and now manages a remote estate. Ella is now officially in exile. This information practically equates to Ella's removal from further affairs in the central part of the kingdom. And now her engagement to Guilan is no longer of equal benefit to the royal family. But the queen apologizes if her position seems vague, in which case she asks that her views on the matter be dried up again. And for the moment, she is against strengthening ties from the Walker family due to Isabella's personal qualities. Elizabeth then looks at her stepmother, who along with Isabella look very puzzled by the queen's words. Elizabeth apologizes if it sounded offensive to the stepmother and Isabella, but in saying this, Elizabeth did not intend to disrespect the lady. On the other hand, she fears that the royal family may become puppets in the hands of the Walker family. And history has known many countries whose rulers have completely lost their authority, leading to the collapse of their states, and the queen cannot allow this history to repeat itself in their great kingdom. However, ties with influential noble families can bring the royal family prosperity as well. So Elizabeth is going to offer the ultimate compromise in return, says his mother, and the woman says that if the rapprochement directly Ella Walker herself to translate into a favorable position with ties to her family. The king says that if such a thing were actually possible, it would be worth considering. Ella does not understand why Her Majesty Elizabeth insists on Ella's candidacy, for Ella has no outstanding abilities. And even if she is better than Isabella, it can only result in the younger sister taking revenge on the elder sister and Ella being in a bad position. Elizabeth plans to change Ella Walker's potential. Elizabeth wants to propose a contest between Ella and Isabella. They will both be bride candidates and can prove their strength. They can make the queen the one who will do the most good for the country. Elizabeth proposes a real duel to see the result, and then decide which of the girls is best suited to be Gillan's bride. Isabella Walker, who has the support and influence of her family, and Ella Walker, who will have to do without any outside help. If Ella Walker seems to be up to the task, she may become a great ruler as the former kingdom herself. If only Ella has the wisdom to deal with the serious ills plaguing this country. Her stepmother tells the dear queen that as a representative of the Walker family, she cannot agree to such unheard-of nonsense. Isabella stands in solidarity with her mother. The girl says there is no need for such a contest between her and her elder sister, as it is clear which of them is more suitable for the role of queen. Elizabeth says that if that is the case, it would be good to confirm Isabella's words to the maiden, and either Isabella doubts her strength and will not be able to defeat Ella in battle. But Isabella looks angrily at Ella and says that before she talks about self-confidence, she wants to confirm her hunch that Ella is probably not a good opponent for Isabella. At one point, Ella looks sadly at Elizabeth and says that she doesn't think she's fit to be queen either and is truly sorry about Her Majesty's proposal. But could she pretend as if the conversation never happened? Even now, Eastwood's already been hurt. And what if it comes to an open confrontation with Isabella? Ella realizes she could be killed either covertly or executed. Ella already has an estate to protect and wants to avoid another execution at all costs. The king asks Gillan what he thinks about it, since it's about his future queen. But Gillan says there is no cause for concern, and he will follow whatever choice is in the best interests of the state. Elizabeth looks at her son and asks the king what he thinks if they were to break their meeting for a short break. The king says it helps to take some time to think things over, and the former queen speaks the truth. Elizabeth tells the heroine that he has a large number of things the queen would like to discuss. There is Ella. Couldn't Madame go out on the balcony after they finish this conversation? Ella agreed, and Elizabeth found herself together with Ella on the balcony. The girl was amazed at the beauty of the kingdom that was visible from that height. Elizabeth confesses that this is her favorite place. Elizabeth asks Ella to take a good look at the landscape and tell her what she thinks, because at least she can get an independent opinion. Ella takes a closer look at the view of the royal capital and realizes that the view of this place is familiar. But Ella also sees the slums that stand on the horizon behind the slender and beautiful houses. Elizabeth says that the girl can see from Ella's face that she has noticed the slums. At first glance, it seems that the capital city is still prosperous. However, this country is already at its breaking point. If things continue to go downhill, the kingdom will fall apart. Elizabeth says that Ella was able to identify the city's flaw just by looking down on it from this height, and Ella the Beautiful is fit to be queen. Just as Elizabeth knew she would. Ella says it is a great honor to hear such words from a former queen and great mother of the realm, and she is very grateful to Her Majesty. Elizabeth says that this title is an exaggeration, and at the time she was just desperate. And now, as Ella can see, royalty alone is no longer enough to maintain order and the integrity of the structure of government. And this is one of the reasons why the king is so desperate to strengthen ties with the Walker family. But now, at a time of crisis for the country, Elizabeth believes it is of the utmost importance that the next queen upholds the kingdom with Geelong. And when Elizabeth heard of Ella's success at Eastwood, she realized that only Ella could do that. Her meddling must have caused Ella a lot of trouble, So she apologizes to Ella, for the old woman has been playing her games a little too much. And Ella says Elizabeth shouldn't say that. After all, it's a great honor for Ella to be praised by Her Majesty. But she's not good enough to take on such an important role, like being queen. Ella doesn't think she can live up to Her Highness's expectations, and so couldn't Elizabeth give up the idea of competing for the role of bride. But Elizabeth tells Ella with complete certainty that the girl need not worry. Elizabeth understands perfectly well Ella's heart is troubled because she is aware of the inner workings of their family. Ella was horrified by what she heard and does not understand why Elizabeth would involve her in this affair. For Elizabeth must realize that Ella is in a very bad situation because of her stepmother and her sister. Elizabeth says she was running out of time, so she had to take drastic measures. Elizabeth says that she has a conscience about her little Ella. However, Ella knows the current situation in the Walker family, and especially what happened to those nobles who dared to oppose Isabella. Elizabeth has seen enough of that in the last 3 years. Even without all the information, it's not hard to guess that Ella's banishment wasn't justified. Ella begins to cry and says that Elizabeth is well aware that depending on the outcome of this contest, Ella could be killed. Elizabeth says that in this country. More specifically, for the good of the future of this world, and that's what she's thinking when she tries to risk Ella's life for the good of the people. Well, Elizabeth thinks that's not the answer Ella expects her to give. Ella says that she knows Elizabeth as a skilled negotiator, and that she's been called the Great Mother of the Realm, because Elizabeth once managed to improve relations with a country on the brink of war, their kingdom. Elizabeth smiles and says that it is a very old story, and she would not like to remember it now. Ella says that nevertheless, she asks to be allowed to make her stand this time. After all, Ella's life is no longer hers alone. She has an estate that Ella must protect, so she can't die and let people be without their mistress. Elizabeth realizes that Ella has a keen sense of responsibility and strong stamina, and Elizabeth sees that she was not wrong in her decision. She understands Ella's words and says that she has a very good case to offer. Elizabeth says that if Ella will cooperate with her, she will support Eastwood financially and help him survive the competition. Elizabeth believes that this is exactly what Ella needs most. Ella realizes that this is undeniable, and securing stable funding is a significant problem for Eastwood at the moment. If the reform process continues in the same vein, then within the next few years the security issue will be fully resolved and other sectors can be addressed. But they can manage without the Queen's support. The only thing Ella asks for is peace and quiet and a chance to forget about the Walker family, or asks for that. Does Ella still think that peaceful time will ever come for her? Once Isabella and Gilan are officially betrothed and she's queen, her sister's likely to be even more unruly than she is now. And if Ella bends now, you'll set off a chain of chaos that will ensnare Eastwood. And will Ella be able to protect Eastwood from Isabella with the powers she has now? Maybe only in the future, in a few years, but in the meantime, Isabella will have more power and money and time to play for her sister's favor. Ella's present losses are due to bandit robberies. That is why Elizabeth offered to invest in Eastwood in return for their cooperation. But Ella asks not to hurry, because she has not yet given her consent, and she does not know the true feelings of His Highness Gilan on her candidacy for bride. But Elizabeth wonders if she hasn't already told him that Ella is the only one worthy of being his bride. It's not just Ella's skills, and Elizabeth believes that only Ella can free this child from her chains. The heroine doesn't understand what Elizabeth is talking about, or what chains are holding Gilan back. At one point, Gilan breaks into the conversation and asks his grandmother to refrain from further speculation. Ella was a little intimidated by us. Elizabeth tries to change the subject and asks her grandson, has he decided to admire the scenery too? But Gilan says that his father asked him to bring his grandmother along with Ella. Gilan had originally planned to have a servant do the job, but when he heard them talking about him, he decided to come out here himself to stop talking. And Elizabeth asked her grandson what she said that bothered the boy. Gilan says his grandmother knows very well that what the royals say goes around the country pretty fast. That's why they shouldn't be too open with the people, especially the aristocracy. Then Gilan looks at Ella standing next to him, and the girl is a little embarrassed by Gilan's gaze. Elizabeth says that Gilan is as adamant as ever and asks, What if by showing certain problems it is possible to remove the very cause of the weakness? But Gilan says that they are here to discuss a specific topic, so this is not the time or place for anything else. Gilan turns to Ella Walker, and as a prince he declares to Ella that what she has just heard is of no consequence. Ella agrees with Gilan and says that she understood him perfectly. Ella doesn't think she's heard anything important, but it's all very strange. Gilan ponders that a typical aristocrat would probably take advantage of what he said and make some outrageous demands. Not a chance. What kind of man would be sympathetic to such a thing? What on earth is this woman up to? Ella sees Gilan's mind sinking and asks if His Majesty is all right. But Gilan says everything is fine and there is nothing wrong. Gilan says they should discuss Ella's silence fee and asks how much the girl wants. Ella doesn't understand what the guy is talking about or what the fee is. Gilan says that in that case, if the information leaks out, he can give Ella the appropriate penalties for breaking the deal. Ella is a little confused and asks Gilan, is she really unreliable? Gilan goes on to say that it goes without saying, because an aristocrat can never be trusted and that's under a rat. Aristocrats are always trying to take more for themselves and gain more money as well as power. Ella tells Gilan not to worry. The girl smiles and says that the information she has just received is of no value to Ella, so there is no need for any compensation. And of course she does not intend to tell anyone about it. But Gilan officially turns to Ella Walker and says that it doesn't matter if Ella found something of value in the information and he wants assurances from Ella. Ella doesn't understand why Gilan is being so harsh with her. But out loud, Ella says the opposite, and since Gilan insists, as steward of Eastwood, she would like to ask for help with provisions and supplies. But Gilan says it's not a matter of personal gain. Gilan doesn't realize what investing in this backwater property would do for Ella. But Ella is a little embarrassed and happily tells Gilan that Eastwood is an extremely important asset to her. The welfare of her subjects is Ella's welfare, and she needs nothing more. At this point, Elizabeth begins to smile and realizes that Ella has picked the right key to Gilan's heart. The prince is a little surprised at Ella's words and says that he can agree with Lady Walker, and then he will provide the necessary funds and a sum of money to support Eastwood. Gilan says that this sum can either be put in Ella's pocket or used for the good of her people, and she can decide for herself. Ella bows to Gilan and says she is most grateful to the prince. Dali Gilan says he would like to return to the hall with the girl's permission. Gilan also tells his grandmother not to stay out in the wind too long because it is not healthy and it is better to be safe. Elizabeth thanks Gilan for his concern and promises her grandson that he will be back soon. Elizabeth then apologizes to Ella for disturbing her. Ella apologizes and says it was her fault, but Elizabeth says that she does not think their collaboration with His Highness Gilan will be fruitful. But nevertheless, her decision is unchanged. If anyone deserves to be Gilan's bride, it's Ella. But Ella asks if the conversations they've just had wasn't revealing enough, and it doesn't seem that their fundamental values are the same as Gilan's. Besides, if Ella enters the competition for the role of bride and loses to Isabella, wouldn't that put Elizabeth at risk? Elizabeth says something about how much Ella cares for Eastwood is commensurate with how much Elizabeth loves this country, and so she will do everything she can to set the country on the right course and give people hope for a happy life. And that is why Elizabeth thought it best to bet on Ella, because they are so much alike. Elizabeth goes on to say that perhaps Ella is getting cold in this cold and can go back inside. And what she said earlier, don't be so quick to jump to conclusions. It's important to come to a decision that Ella will be on her own. But the meeting is about to resume, and for that she has no time to spare. Elizabeth will buy enough time just for Ella, and after all, Elizabeth could not play court games that would have died a long time ago. As Ella headed off in her carriage, she reflected that Her Majesty had given her the opportunity to reflect. As the people gathered in the hall for further discussion, Elizabeth said it would be wise to set another day to finalize the details of the competition for the role of bride. The king says he will do as Mother says to apologize to his son for disturbing him, but Gilan replies that it is part of his role. Elizabeth further says that Ella and Isabella will be in touch shortly to clarify the details. Elizabeth then looks at Isabella and asks that the girls behave in a manner worthy of the royal name. Ella realizes that the royal family, as well as her estate and the Walker family, are all a real burden to Ella. The girl does not know what she should do in such a situation and hopes that further events will give her the right path for her development, and that Ella will be able to survive in further confrontation with her sister.